The holidays are a time for celebration, reflection, and eggnog, and my favorite's the eggnog, provided there's plenty of brandy. As 2012 winds down, we look back at the year that was and ask, what did we learn? I'm John Phillips. You can tell what Tammy learned already. And joining me on set is Tammy Bruce, host of the Tammy Bruce radio show, who you can conveniently find online at tammybruce.com. And next to her is PJTV's Stephen Kruiser himself. Thanks so much for being here. 2012 was a big year in politics. We saw one of the longest and nastiest campaigns come to a close. Stephen, what was the biggest thing that we learned this year?
That we learned?
Yes, we learned.
The GOP.
That you learned.
That I learned personally was to, if you have angst during the primaries about your chances in the general, don't go all cheerleader for the last month or so. Stick to what you were telling yourself all and be true to your school, which I did not do, and I went a little cheerleader and I went away from some of my own basic principles. I think what we learned in general was that the GOP still absolutely needs to learn to get a ground game. I mean, and needs to learn. They're not even in a place where they can just throw one into place right now. They need to start getting the mindset that it takes to work even in the off-election years to get a ground game.
Tammy Bruce?
You know, there's now some discussion about people are finally looking seriously at the money going into certain consultants, the nature of what they were doing and why they were doing it. And I think cheerleading can be important. I mean, part of an election is the battle for people's minds, is the get out the vote dynamic. It's having people feel that there is a potential. And throughout this dynamic, there was potential for us to win, for conservatives to win. But I think that the thing that the biggest issue is that you've got an ensconced, and I think it's now become more clear, Republican establishment that are Ken dolls. That you saw this meltdown. Now, in 2010, when the Democrats lost, you didn't see a meltdown. You didn't see a wringing of hands. They doubled down on the agenda on what they believe. Now, even though what they believe is rather craven, at least now the Republicans we now know, the establishment has got to believe in something, and the people in there now don't, and we've got to get people in there who do.
I learned two things. One, never, ever, ever trust Dick Morris. As much as you want to, as much as you'd like to, whenever you look at him on TV, just think of Hooker's toes. Because what he's saying has no truth to it at all. Number two, the makeup of the country has changed. I was looking at some of the numbers, and the Romney campaign, everyone's trashed the Romney campaign. I thought the Romney campaign did a pretty good job.
I did too, yeah.
The Romney campaign won white voters by a much larger number than McCain did last time, or even George W. Bush did when he won the elections of 2000 and 2004. White voters under the age of 30, college kids, went for Romney by 10 points. The demographics of the country have changed, and the Republican Party needs to find a way to appeal to Latinos, to blacks, to Asians, particularly Latinos, because I think that's where the growth opportunity is.
You think they got stuck, though, in the religious politics, thinking that that would answer what they thought was the most important contingent, group, which are the evangelicals. The fact of the matter is, if you just articulate an authentic conservative ideal, which people like us managed to do, strangely enough, in Los Angeles, we're able to articulate that ideal that appeals to everyone. But they seem to think that they don't need to articulate it anymore. They don't need to appeal to these hermetically sealed little cultures that the left has created, which is a major mistake, but a broad-based appeal to personal independence, success, whatever the individual American dream is, and they've dropped that. They've become isolated and insular, and I think that's a major issue.
Well, go ahead.
You go back to what Governor Susana Martinez said at the GOP convention, where she was a lifelong Democrat, mostly by habit because she's a Latina, and then she had the conservative ideals articulated to her in a toned-down political format, and she had an epiphany, and she's like, God damn, we're Republicans.
Well, that's what most Americans, I mean, most Americans are certainly authentically, kind of classically conservative, and yet we want personal independence and freedom. And so that's read by certain religious political frameworks as, heathens. Well, we're not, but we want to be left alone, and I think that's key.
You've worked on campaigns, both as a Democrat and as a Republican, that have done well with Latinos. Kathleen Brown, even though she lost the election, did well with Latinos. Some of the Republicans that you worked with have done well. George W. Bush, Arnold Schwarzenegger. You've also
He's done really well with Latinos, especially if they work with him. Hi, Johnny.
Hey!
Johnny.
Oh, there we go. That's part of the company.
Yes.
And you were very active in Tea parties in the
Yeah.
Southwest,
Yeah.
including Arizona.
Yeah.
What is, if you were to narrow it down to the one magic bullet that Republicans could do next time around, midterms, to get more Latinos to come out and support them, what would it be?
It's not pandering to issues of immigration. It is about, and it's not even about pandering or doing these kind of patronizing conversations about, we love you and we care about you. The most you can care about someone is setting them free, right? And freedom comes with financial independence, so that you can live where you want to live, you can send your kids to school you want to send them to, you can live, you can have your own political voice. I mean, that's the message that appeals, I think, to everyone. If we fall into the trap of perpetuating this message that each group has to have some different kind of package offered to them, that's a huge mistake. And I think that this is not brain surgery. First of all, we have to get rid of the leadership as it is now. That's going to be a big message in 2014, and that'll appeal to everybody. You get rid of the Boehners and the McConnells of the world. I mean, nobody likes liars or panderers, and get people who are talking about the legitimate conservative message that appeals to Latinos. Brown did, Schwarzenegger did, because both of them, as a Democrat and a Republican ultimately, appeal to people's better natures and the natural sensibility of wanting people to be free. And that appeals to everyone, regardless of your complexion.
What do you think? You think Latinos or Asians are going to be where they really put their efforts into next time around? Or
Well,
both?
I think the Latino vote, just because of the demographics, is where you have to focus first. And I think there's a natural constituency there. I'm a Tucson native, okay? When I was a kid, 33% or so Latino, Mexican-American population in Tucson. And there are a lot of small business owners there who are of Mexican heritage, who are, for the most part, conservative-leaning. My best friend is a Latino, and he's more conservative than I am, if possible, maybe. But I think there's a more natural constituency there than people think there is. You see it with the Cuban Americans still, and I think the focus could be there, again, with the message of economic freedom. You can't go out with the kind of pandering that the left does, because although they're successful with the way they do it, just because they are doesn't mean we have to be them.
I think they're only successful because the Republicans melted away.
Yeah,
and that is the only reason that message was successful, and that's what the left relies on, is us not pushing back or answering back.
Winners and losers of 2012. Who is the biggest political winner of the 2012 campaign?
As an individual, or I mean, the biggest loser is the United States at this point because of the nature of what's going to happen. The biggest winner, and this might be against the conventional wisdom in a lot of ways, can be Tea Party and the average American, because it reminded us and it enforced and reasserted, and I think it can't be reversed, the cravenness of both machines, of both the Democrats and now I'm an independent conservative, but I think what Americans have seen finally is confirmed that both machines are a problem, and I think that the biggest winner ultimately is going to be Tea Party, and as a result, this country in 2014.
Biggest winner, biggest loser, 2012.
Biggest winner, I think, individually, is Claire McCaskill, because this was the Hindenburg on fire, on the ground, the frame melting away already, and she had that seat pretty much gift-wrapped and handed back to her. She was going to lose that seat. And the fact that she is still a senator, she won the lottery. The biggest loser, I think, was Karl Rove and his legacy. You know, at times we've all liked some of what Karl's done and everything, but the Rove model that worked so well in the early 2000s was an unmitigated disaster this year.
Well, it's almost like he's like the French army where he's fighting the last battle. He's not fighting the current battle.
Yeah.
And what Rove suggested and what happened with the Romney campaign would have been good enough to win 4 years ago or 8 years ago, but not this time around. And you have to win this time around if you're going to win the White House.
What the difference is who can communicate. Is that Rove was able to have people believe that George W. Bush was a conservative, because new media, social media, this media, has changed our ability to say, wait a minute. This is not the case. No one of that ilk has adapted to the fact that we have managed to push back and answer back. And the first person that gets that, I don't think any of them will win. The other big winner, of course, is Ted Cruz. I mean, we'll see how he delivers. He's been very quiet, but I think that he's a huge winner, too.
I think the biggest winner of 2012 was John Boehner. John Boehner was the only Republican who won his election. We lost the Senate. A lot of people thought we could have had a chance of winning the Senate. Didn't happen. A lot of people thought that Romney had a chance at winning the presidency. That didn't happen either. But the House is still in control. The Republicans are still in control of the House. And a lot of the guys who would be causing Boehner problems are gone. Alan West is not there. Joe Walsh is not there. So his power base in the House of Representatives is now stronger now than it's ever been
No,
before.
He made moves to
right.
consolidate this past
And
week,
you've been
too.
right. That was a surprising answer, but I will never, well, I probably will doubt you again, but I will listen more carefully. Look, he's been having some problems. He did the conservative purge. There are still some, Tom Price says he's not going to run against him. But there's still an election that has to happen in January. You think, obviously, that
I think he's safe.
And he's not going to be contested at all.
No.
I think he's safe right now. I think had people been a little more focused on a change of leadership in 2010 as he ascended to power. I was unhappy. Everyone here at PJTV remembers we were covering it that night, and I said, I'm just disappointed that Boehner's going to be speaker.
But he was born in a bar.
And yeah, but I think eventually, I mean, the only one who could have an outside shot at replacing him right now is probably Cantor, which isn't really that much of an upgrade.
Well, I mean, I would just love to see the fight of Paul Ryan showing up and saying, bring it. That would be hot.
Biggest loser, Nancy Pelosi.
Okay.
Because the Democrats didn't take over this
Good
time.
point. Yeah.
They're not going to take over next time. The party out of power always does poorly in the midterms of a second term.
point.
She's going to be out of power, and the Democrats are going to be out of power for at least 4 years. So I think it was a bad election for Nancy Pelosi. All right, Stephen Kruiser, Tammy Bruce, thanks so much for stopping by. That's all
well
the time we
done.
have for today.
Wow.
So from all of us here at PJTV, have a safe and happy holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. See you next time.